Chapter 1. The Puzzle of the Missing Fingerprint. The chill of late November had settled over London in a grey, drizzling cloak as Hercule Poirot and Dr. John H. Watson stepped from the hansom cab onto the gravel drive of Belhaven Manor. The great Tudor house loomed before them, tall chimneys exhaling curls of smoke into the damp air. Gas lamps cast amber pools of light upon the rain-slicked stones. Poirot, immaculate even in the gathering gloom, surveyed the facade with his customary air of gentle apprehension. "Mon ami," he said, adjusting his black overcoat, "we have been summoned urgently by Lady Belhaven. She reports a theft most extraordinary. The disappearance of a priceless cameo from her sitting-room, and yet no trace of forced entry, no sign of disturbance, and no fingerprint." His moustaches quivered. "Imagine, Watson, in a crime of theft. There is nothing to identify the thief save a single violet-smudged glass that held the cameo's display case lid. Yet even that bears no print. We must unravel this puzzle of the missing fingerprint." Watson, umbrella in hand, followed Poirot along the stone pathway to the front door, where a footman in livery waited with a silver-handled bell. Inside, they entered the wide marble-floored hall, lined with ancestral portraits and a grand staircase rising into shadow. An air of tense expectancy filled the room. Mrs. Hudson would have been aghast, but here only the subdued murmur of servants and the rustle of Lady Belhaven's silk gown broke the hush. Lady Belhaven emerged at the foot of the stairs, tall, composed, but with a ghost of distress in her pale blue eyes. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," she breathed, "thank you for coming at such short notice." She inclined her head to Watson. "And Dr. Watson, always a comfort. Please follow me to the salon." They passed through a panelled corridor, scented faintly of rosewood polish. At the salon door, Lady Belhaven paused. "I would ask you, monsieur, not to speak of this publicly. Our family reputation—" Poirot bowed. "Madame, discretion is my first rule. Now, if you please." Within the salon, a fire flickered in a low hearth. A grand display cabinet stood against the far wall, its glass dome now empty. On a green baize table before it lay a violet-tinted wine-glass, its bowl smeared with a lavender residue. Poirot's eyes lit as he examined the glass. With gloved fingertips, he lifted it and traced a circle of purple along the rim. "Note, Watson," he murmured as he passed the glass to his friend. "The residue of crushed petals, one might say lavender. Yet the glass felt smooth, unbroken. It is as though the thief handled no surface but this, and yet even here no fingerprint remains." He turned the goblet in his hand, revealing a tiny chip at its base. "Look closely, a minute fracture expertly repaired. This glass was chosen for its flaw, broken, mended, smoothed, and then stained. A perfect decoy." Watson set the glass on the table. But why stain it? To draw attention away from the cabinet? Poirot's gaze travelled to the empty dome. And why remove a cameo without disturbing the cabinet's locking mechanism? He stepped toward the display. "Observe, Watson. The latch is of a simple spring catch, no lock to pick, merely the pressure of a slender rod inserted here." He pointed to a narrow groove at the cabinet's edge. One need only slip a blade or boned-handled pick into that seam to release the lid. He pressed gently, and the dome lifted with a soft click. Lady Belhaven gasped. "You do not think the thief remains within?" Poirot shook his head. "No, madame. The theft occurred precisely during a brief interval this afternoon, when the house staff were engaged elsewhere." He turned to her butler, Mr. Fletcher, who hovered by the wall. "Mr. Fletcher, will you recount the day's events?" The butler inclined his head. "Naturally, monsieur. At 2 o'clock, the ladies' tea party concluded. The salon servants retired to the silver pantry. At precisely 2:10, my cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, requested a word in private, drawing Miss Langford and Mrs. Edmonds into the billiard room. The valet escorted Colonel Fitzwilliam to the library, and the maid saw him enter. No one returned to this salon until 20 past, when the afternoon post arrived." Watson frowned. "So, the window was closed and the door locked?" Fletcher nodded. "Closed and locked by the maid. I confirmed it myself upon my return." Poirot tapped his cane. "Then our thief must have entered and exited in those 10 minutes, and done so without leaving a print, without moving a dusting cloth, without arousing suspicion. A remarkable feat." He turned to Lady Belhaven. "Madame, I must ask that no one leave this house until we have spoken with every guest and servant present." Lady Belhaven's lip trembled. "Of course, I will detain everyone in the drawing-room." She summoned her maid with a gesture. "Please see that the other guests assemble promptly." Within minutes the drawing-room filled with 6 household members. Colonel Fitzwilliam, tall and dapper in his uniform. Miss Langford, the governess, nervous and glancing at Poirot. Mrs. Edmonds, the housekeeper, stout and hearty. The maid, Mary Briggs, youthful and wide-eyed, and Mr. Fletcher. Poirot studied each in turn. "Colonel," he began, "you saw the maid escort you to the library at 2:10. The colonel inclined his head. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. We discussed my mother's upcoming estate visit. Then I returned to the billiard-room for brandy." His tone was cordial but firm. "I saw no one in the corridor." "Miss Langford," Poirot continued, "you accompanied Mrs. Edmonds. Did you pause outside the salon?" The governess swallowed. "No, monsieur. We passed quickly. I heard no unusual sound." Mrs. Edmonds spoke next. "I can confirm the salon was silent. We had no thought to return." Poirot nodded. "Mary Briggs, you locked the salon door." "Yourself?" the detective asked. The maid's gaze flickered. "Yes, monsieur. The key turn was solid." Poirot turned to Fletcher. "And you, sir, confirmed the security of the cabinet?" Fletcher inclined his head stiffly. "I did, monsieur." A silence fell. Watson whispered, "We have no culprit." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "On the contrary, Watson, we have several. For see, the violet residue was deliberately placed, yet none of our suspects had cause to handle the wine-glass. That belonged to Lady Belhaven's own crystal service." He addressed Lady Belhaven. "Did you order lavender tea this afternoon?" She shook her head. "No, but I scented potpourri in the drawing-room." Poirot tapped his nose. "My friends, I believe the thief used the glass as a red herring, destined to draw suspicion away from the true instrument of theft." He approached a side table with an inkwell and blotter, lifted a piece of blotting paper, and produced a stylus with a tiny nib. The butt of his cane reversed. This instrument, he explained, was dipped in lavender oil and used to wipe away any trace of fingerprint from the cameo's bronze mount before removal. Then the oil was smeared upon the glass, to complete the misdirection. The maid gasped. "Mr. Fletcher, your duties included polishing the cabinet's brass every Wednesday. You had access to lavender oil in the polishing cupboard." Fletcher's face drained of colour. "Monsieur, you insinuate—" Poirot raised a finger. "No insinuation, but demonstration." He produced Mary Briggs's maid's scarf, dampened with lavender oil. "Do forgive me, Mary, but this was found hidden behind your trunk." The maid trembled. I... Poirot held up a hand. "Let us hear your account." Mary's shoulders shook. "I never meant to steal for myself. Mr. Fletcher promised me a share, if I would assist him. He said Lady Grace's butler earned more than me, and a bit of extra money from this sale would secure my family's winter." Watson frowned. "Mr. Fletcher, is this true?" The butler's jaw clenched. I sought to help Mary. The sale of the cameo, though heartless, would raise her dowry and wages. I meant no real harm." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "Your intentions were misguided, but the law is the law. Mr. Fletcher, you will return the cameo immediately and face the magistrate." Fletcher bowed his head. "I accept your judgment, monsieur." Poirot turned to the assembled household. "Let this be a lesson. The greatest puzzles are not always wrought by strangers in the dark, but by those whose hands we trust. The missing fingerprint crafted by lavender and contrivance was but a symptom of compromised integrity. Yet truth prevails when even the smallest clue is honoured." He bowed. "I shall return the cameo to its display and ensure the cabinet's lock is reinforced. Dr. Watson, will you escort Mr. Fletcher to the magistrate?" Watson offered his arm to Fletcher, who accepted with quiet resignation. As the household dispersed, Poirot and Watson lingered in the now silent salon. The empty dome, once a symbol of mystery, now stood restored to its rightful place. Watson patted Poirot on the shoulder. "Another case closed, my friend, and with justice tempered by mercy." Poirot nodded, his eyes serene. "Yes, Watson, mercy, guided by truth. For in the end, the human heart, though fallible, must illuminate the path to virtue." Outside, the November rain fell softly upon Belhaven Manor, washing away the residue of deceit and unveiling once more the promise of a clear-fingered dawn. Chapter 2. The Second Disappearance. The dawn of the following day broke cold and grey over Belhaven Manor, and the hush of aftermath lay heavy upon its corridors. Lady Belhaven received fresh tea in her morning room, yet her eyes remained troubled even as the steam curled from her cup. Dr. Watson sat opposite her, while Hercule Poirot, ever immaculately clad, studied a small tray, upon which rested the recovered cameo, now resanitized of lavender, oil and encased once more under its crystal dome. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "you can rest assured the cameo is secure." Lady Belhaven offered a wan smile, but shook her head. "I fear to rest, Monsieur Poirot. The very thought that one of my own servants betrayed me." She broke off, pressing a gloved hand to her cheek. "I cannot bear the disgrace." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, regret must be endured, but let us not allow regret to cloud vigilance. I shall remain at your home until we are certain no further mischief occurs." Lady Belhaven bowed, relief flickering in her eyes. By mid-morning, Poirot had posted discreet notices among the London antiquarian clubs and instructed Watson to coordinate with Scotland Yard's local inspector. Meanwhile, Poirot moved through Belhaven's silent halls, checking each window latch, each cabinet lock. He found comfort in the solidity of brass and oak, yet sensed a restless presence, an unsettled spirit of doubt that refused to still. At precisely 2:30, Mrs. Edmonds, the housekeeper, summoned Poirot to the drawing-room. "Monsieur, I beg your pardon, but the cameo—" She swallowed hard. "It is gone." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "Again?" Mrs. Edmonds nodded, tears in her eyes. "The dome stands empty, monsieur, and the crystal looks as though smashed from within." Poirot crossed the carpet swiftly and peered at the display. The dome lay in jagged shards upon the green baize, its lock broken. Yet the seal and the dome's edges bore no sign of prying. And once more, there was not so much as a fingerprint on glass or marble. "Observe, Watson," said Poirot, kneeling among the fragments. "The glass is internally shattered. A small, well-directed blow from within was sufficient to crack it without opening the lock." He held a shard to the light. "See how the fracture radiates from a single point, as though struck by the ball of a glove-covered fist." He rose. "Our thief has learned from yesterday's discovery. No touch upon the glass, no printed clue, yet none the less they persist." Within the hour, a telegram arrived from Inspector Faraday at Scotland Yard. "Cameo matching Belhaven description offered for private sale at Montague Street. Vendor claims it came from closed estate. Request your presence." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Montague Street, Watson, an area known for discreet auctions of provenance suspect antiquities. We must depart at once." He turned to Lady Belhaven. "Madame, I shall recover your treasure. Pray remain here in safety." She grasped his hand. "I entrust you to my gratitude, monsieur. Do not fail me. By late afternoon." Poirot and Watson alighted before an unassuming townhouse numbered 18 Montague Street. A brass placard read, "Madame Duchesne's private sale of rare antiquities." Through the fanlight they could hear muted voices and the clink of glass. Entering, they found a small gallery lined with framed prints and glass cases, illuminated by shaded lamps. A discreet auctioneer in spectacles welcomed them with a nod. "Messieurs," he said, "you arrive early for tonight's sale. Our catalogues list a Roman intaglio, an Etruscan vase, and a cameo of exceptional artistry recently acquired." Poirot inclined his head. "Would you permit us to examine that cameo in advance? I have an urgent interest in its authenticity." The auctioneer hesitated, but led them past a masked hostess to a low table upon which lay a cameo under a crystal dome. Poirot signalled Watson to stand back as he removed his gloves. Bending close, the detective smiled grimly. "Identical to Lady Belhaven's, mon ami, save for a telltale detail." He tapped the cameo's frame. Yesterday's cameo bore a minute chip on the lower rim, now polished smooth. Here, the chip remains untouched. He traced the edge with a finger. This is a third, entirely distinct object, neither the original nor yesterday's recovered. Cameo, but a third copy, cut with skill to distract us. Watson's eyes narrowed. So, the thief aims to confuse us with multiple forgeries. Poirot nodded. A veritable hall of mirrors. Yet only one cameo is true. From the galleries, corner, a voice murmured. Monsieur Poiret. Poirot turned to see a slender man in a charcoal overcoat, hat under arm. He wore the air of confident advantage. I believe you have questions about that cameo. Poirot regarded him calmly. And you, sir, claim provenance. The gentleman inclined his head. I acquired it at a Geneva auction. I assure you, no forging hand touched it. Poirot's moustaches twitched. And you, monsieur, are you French? The man's lip quivered. I am indeed. Poirot stepped forward. Then perhaps you can explain the violet residue upon its dome. You did, after all, purchase it in Geneva, capital of perfume. The gentleman's eyes widened. Perfume! Poirot held up a hand. No need for denial. You hoped to draw our gaze to this cameo, while the real prize lay elsewhere. You are our second suspect. The man backed away, hat trembling in his hands. I mean no harm. I only seek profit. Poirot's gaze was steely. Profit built upon theft is no profit at all. He signalled Watson. Escort our friend to the door and inform the inspector. We have work to do. Watson stepped forward, and the Frenchman yielded with desperate compliance. Outside the townhouse, Poirot and Watson retrieved their cab and sped through gaslit streets toward Belhaven Manor, mind and heart alight with determination. We must intercept the thief as they return the real cameo to a secret buyer, Poirot said. Only one person knew of the initial disappearance, the butler and the maid. But now we add an outsider, the French dealer, and perhaps one more conspirator. Watson tapped his notebook. Tomorrow's investigation will account for Monday's staff roster, plus any visitors with foreign accents. Poirot nodded. Oui, and should our quarry attempt another exchange, we shall be waiting. As the cab rattled over cobbles, the rain began again, washing the city in silver sheen. Poirot sat deep in the cushions, little grey cells already, whirring through the puzzle's next layers. Watson, gazing at the reflected lamps on wet pavement, felt both exhilaration and dread at the challenge ahead. The cameo lay again unprotected, its theft blossoming into a game of cunning that stretched from the halls of Belhaven to the secret salons of Montague Street. But no deception, he thought, could outwit the ingenious mind beside him, a mind that would not rest until the missing fingerprint, merely absent from glass, was found upon the truth. Chapter 3. Midnight at Montague Street and the Double Cross. The night air was chill and perfumed with the dying embers of autumn, as Hercule, Poirot and Dr. Watson alighted from their cab before number 18 Montague Street. Gas lamps cast slender halos upon the wet pavement, illuminating the discreet inscription above the door. Madame Duchesne's private sale of rare antiquities. Poirot drew in a breath of London's damp energy. Mon ami, he said, brushing a stray hair from his forehead, the game resumes at this very threshold. I suspect our French acquaintance will return for another viewing, perhaps to reclaim the third cameo, or to tip us toward the true object of desire. Watson tightened his overcoat. Then we must be prepared, Poirot. The inspector awaits us within. They crossed the threshold into a small vestibule lined with moth-eaten rugs, and Madame Duchesne herself, an elegant woman in her late 40s, wrapped in furs, greeted them with forced cordiality. Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Watson, welcome, she cooed. The sale opens momentarily. Please follow me." She led them into the gallery proper, where a cluster of collectors in formal evening dress mingled beside glass cases and framed catalogues. The air was taut with anticipation. The auctioneer, a lean man with pince-nez glasses, stood before a podium flanked by 2 additional cameos, identical in form, if not in provenance, to the Belhaven original. Poirot and Watson took discreet positions at the rear, near a curtained doorway through which staff moved briskly. Inspector Faraday, in plain clothes but easily recognized by his steady bearing, slipped into the gallery beside them. "Good evening, Monsieur Poirot," he murmured. "I trust you found the English cameo satisfactory." Poirot inclined his head. "Quite so, Inspector. Yet I believe our French friend's cameo was neither the original nor the second copy, but a third forgery. Tonight we must unmask his true quarry." Faraday nodded. "Very well. I've arranged a uniformed guard at each exit." The auctioneer tapped his gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen, the first item, an Etruscan bronze fibula." Bids rose and fell, voices ricocheting off the gilded cornices. Poirot listened with polite detachment until the fibula sold, then leaned toward Watson. "Notice, mon ami, that our Frenchman has not yet appeared. If he arrives late, he will draw attention." Watson followed his gaze to a young man in a dark overcoat, hat in hand, slipping through the door. His gait was unhurried, his posture casual, yet Poirot's moustaches twitched in recognition. "Ah," he whispered, "our friend makes his entrance." The man approached the podium as the auctioneer announced the cameos. He removed his hat with a flourish, revealing dark, curling hair and hawk-like eyes. This time, unmistakably, the French dealer, Monsieur Etienne Duval. He bowed to the audience and took a place at the front. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "The next items, at lots 25, 26, and 27, we present 3 antique cameos, each with Italian workmanship of the highest order. Lot 25... Duval leaned forward, inspecting each cameo's subdued halo of light. When the third cameo was placed before him, lot 27, he nodded appreciatively and raised a paddle. Poirot counted silently. "He bids only on the third cameo." Duval's paddle shot up. 10 guineas, then 20. Watson glanced at him. Surely he does not intend to purchase yet another forgery. Poirot shook his head. "No, he bids merely to secure that lot. He needs not buy, but to observe its details." The bidding climbed. 30, 50, 70 guineas. The winner's paddle clicked at 90 guineas. Duval himself. As the gavel fell, he touched the cameo's glass lightly. Poirot's lips curved. Now we discover what he truly seeks. Duval crossed to the display case, accompanied by the auctioneer and a porter. He lifted the dome at a speed and with a surety that spoke of practice, and held the cameo aloft. The crowd gazed on in envy. 2 uniformed constables stationed by the exits looked away. Poirot rose quietly and followed. Duval peered at the cameo's rim and reached for a small glass bottle in his pocket, wiping the mount with skilled precision. Poirot caught the subtle sheen of lavender oil on Duval's thumb. "Forgive me," he said, stepping between Duval and the exit. "You have little time." Duval turned, expression cool. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, so you have discovered my trick." He slipped the bottle back into his coat. "And what would you have, detective?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. 3 things. First, return this cameo to its seller. He gestured to the halted auctioneer, who had recovered his gavel. Second, tell us what you truly seek in this gallery. And third, release the Botticino marble, of which 1 cameo was carved. An object not yet on display, but mentioned by you in conversation with Madame Duchesne. Duval's jaw twitched. You were listening? Poirot inclined his head. One must listen to all the whispers, monsieur. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Monsieur Duval, will you honour your bid or withdraw? Duval hesitated, then replaced the cameo under its dome. Withdraw, he said quietly. The auctioneer nodded and moved on. Duval turned back to Poirot. Very well, I will return the cameo, he said, replacing it in its case, but I will not reveal my true purpose. Poirot's moustaches quivered. Madame Duchesne, would you provide us an unexhibited catalogue? The hostess curtsied and stepped into a side room, returning moments later with a leather booklet. Poirot leafed to the final page where stood, Lot at 30, Botticino marble relief of the Roman Vestal, private reserve, by commission only. He slid the catalogue across the table. Tell me, monsieur, what did I say? Duval inhaled. You spoke of Botticino marble, yes. Poirot laid a gloved finger on the entry. And that is what you sought. Something would be stolen at the gallery's end, not the cameo. Duval's eyes narrowed. You mock me, detective. Poirot's voice was firm. I merely follow the logic. You created a distraction, 3 cameos, 3 auctions, so that you, and you alone, could examine the hidden lot and make your selection. Duval weighed his hat in his hand. And you intend to prevent me? Poirot nodded. We shall see. Duval bowed. Then allow me to depart in peace. If you wish to preserve poor Madame Duchesne's reputation, let us end this farce. He turned toward the door. Poirot blocked his path. Inspector Faraday, a word, please, Poirot called softly. Faraday stepped forward from the shadows. Monsieur Duval, I must ask you to wait. The constables approached. Duval sighed. Very well. I will volunteer my presence at Scotland Yard, if you will permit me to retain my coat. Faraday nodded. You may collect it from the cloakroom in the morning. Duval inclined his head, bitterness in his eyes, then allowed himself to be escorted away. Once Duval had departed, Poirot and Watson conferred with Madame Duchesne and the auctioneer, ensuring that Lot 30 would remain unexhibited until proper security was installed. Faraday accompanied them to the townhouse entrance. A crafty fellow, that Duval, he admitted, but he yields to mastery of the little grey cells. Poirot tapped his cane. Indeed, Inspector, yet there remains more to discover. How he learned of the Botticino relief, and why he covets it. Faraday nodded. I shall join your inquiries tomorrow. Back at Belhaven Manor, Poirot and Watson were welcomed with warm gratitude by Lady Belhaven. The detective produced the Montague Street catalogue. Mon ami, we have foiled a sale, but not yet the theft. Tomorrow we press our advantage to secure the marble relief, to apprehend the mastermind, and to restore your treasures to their rightful place. Lady Belhaven bowed her head. I trust you, Monsieur Poirot, for you see beyond the obvious. Watson placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. and we shall not rest until this puzzle of the missing fingerprint and the missing marble is complete." That night, within the old manor's thick walls, Poirot lay awake, pondering the twist of forgeries and false bids. The chamber beyond was silent, the cameo's dome intact once more. The only evidence of conspiracy lay in scattered catalogues and a vanished fingerprint, an absence of touch that spoke more loudly than any print. And in that absence, Poirot found the most enduring clue: the human heart, guided by greed or devotion, compels even the most subtle deception. But for every deception, the little grey cells stand vigilant, ready to illuminate the darkest corners of intent, and to bring each puzzle finally to light. Chapter 4. The Marbles Vanishing Act. The autumn chill had deepened into frost by the time Hercule Poirot and Dr. Watson descended the sweeping staircase of Belhaven Manor, returning from Montague Street with their frustrated attempt to secure the Botticino marble relief. Lady Belhaven met them in the gallery, her face pale in the flickering gaslight. "Monsieur," she whispered, voice trembling, "the cameo has vanished once more, and now the safe that held the marble relief is empty." Poirot's moustaches twitched with concern as he strode to the carved oak safe at the foot of the grand staircase. Its brass dial stood resolutely at 12 o'clock, just as Watson had set it the previous evening. Yet the iron door gaped ajar. Watson peered inside. The padded interior was unsullied, no hinges bent or lock-powdered, and once again not a single fingerprint marred the wood or metal. "You see," Poirot said softly, "our thief removes with such delicate care that no tool mark remains, no dust disturbed, no print registered. Truly the puzzle of the missing fingerprint." Lady Belhaven's distress was palpable, but Poirot wasted no time in gathering the household. By dusk, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Miss Langford, Mrs. Edmonds, Mary Briggs, and Mr. Fletcher had assembled in the drawing-room. Poirot addressed them all with calm gravity, reminding each that the cameo and the marble relief had vanished in the secure hours of the previous night. He asked if any of them had noticed unusual visitors or sounds, and each repeated the rote alibis. The colonel retired early. The governess heard nothing above the tea-trays. The housekeeper checked the safe herself at 10. The maid slept in. The pantry and the butler made his rounds but noticed no disturbance. Yet the treasures were gone, taken and replaced without a trace. Having established the where and when, Poirot and Watson began to examine the clues afresh. Watson produced a small tray containing the keys recovered from Montague Street and from earlier searches at Belhaven. Poirot scrutinized each. The slender iron key for Montague Street's gallery lock, the gilt auction house key, a tiny brass key stamped with the Belhaven crest, and a worn barrel key matching the safe's mechanism. He asked Lady Belhaven where she had acquired the small crest key. She explained it came from her husband's desk set, believed to open private drawers. Poirot nodded, suspecting a planted misdirection. When he presented the worn barrel key, the butler's face paled. He admitted the key was his to care for, intended for the wine cellar, but failed to account for its wear, aligning with the safe rather than any cellar lock. Mrs. Fletcher shifted uneasily as Poirot laid out his theory. A former servant, Richard, hale, dismissed for forging invoices, had boasted of a duplicate key and intimate knowledge of the house's back entrance. Poirot and Watson wasted no time investigating the east service door, beneath the kitchen wing, where recent footprints still pressed into the gravel. They followed them southward toward the coach house, a dark, abandoned stone building rarely used at night. Pushing open the creaking door, they ascended the ladder into the loft, where dust-covered crates had been disturbed. There lay the stolen relief and cameo, tucked carefully inside a canvas trunk. The thief had clearly intended to retrieve the loot later, but had underestimated Poirot's vigilance. Nearby, pieces of violet-stained silk and sprigs of dried lavender betrayed the same method used at Montague Street: lavender oil to erase prints and misdirect attention. Returning triumphantly to the manor with the recovered artifacts, Poirot devised a trap to catch the culprit in the act of returning them to its hiding place. He arranged a covert announcement that the treasures had been found and secretly restored to the gallery at midnight. He instructed Mrs. Edmonds to prepare lavender-scented tea and leave the teacup in the drawing-room under soft lighting that would highlight any smudged fingerprints. At the appointed hour, he, Watson, Colonel Fitzwilliam, and Mrs. Edmonds took concealed positions around the drawing-room, while the entire household was loitering in the main salon under the pretence of celebrating the recovery. Shortly after 12, Mary Briggs, the maid, crept into the drawing-room, her footsteps light on the carpet. She paused before the sideboard, inhaling the lavender scent, and reached for the teacup, only to find it empty. As she turned, Poirot emerged from the shadows and quietly arrested her. In the hush that followed, he revealed to the assembled household that Mary, in league with the dismissed footman Richard Hale, had used the lavender-scented glass to misdirect suspicion, repeatedly swapping forgeries and exploiting duplicate keys to spirit away the cameo and relief. Under Poirot's calm questioning, Mary confessed tears born of fear and misguided loyalty. She had hoped to reward Hale and secure her own place, never intending to harm the family she served. Poirot addressed Lady Belhaven and the gathered staff. Justice must follow, madame, but mercy tempers its application. Miss Briggs acted not from malice, but from fear and misplaced devotion. Let us not cast her into ruin, but guide her toward better choices. Lady Belhaven, moved by the maid's contrition, pledged to retain her in service under strict supervision and with proper support. The colonel promised to intervene on her behalf, with the magistrate to spare her undue punishment. In that moment, the household breathed a collective sigh of relief. The treasures were safe, the culprit unmasked, and a valuable lesson learned about trust, compassion, and vigilance. By dawn's first light, Belhaven Manor stood quiet and whole once more. Poirot and Watson took their leave, reflecting on the delicate art of detection and the fragile threads of human loyalty. Over breakfast at Baker Street, Watson remarked, "This puzzle of the missing fingerprint led us through forgeries, hidden entrances, and at last to the truth in a frightened heart." Poirot sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Yes, mon ami. The greatest trace is not left on glass, but in the soul. Let us remember that compassion and justice must walk hand in hand under the mantle of the little grey cells." Outside, the London streets gleamed under a crisp November sun, bearing witness to the triumph of integrity and the promise of new mysteries awaiting their discovery. Chapter 5. Hunt for the Footman. The dawn mist had scarcely lifted from the lawns of Belhaven Manor when Hercule Poirot and Dr. Watson emerged from their carriage, their breath visible in the chill morning air. The manor, its stones darkened by rain, looked almost austere in the pale light. The events of the previous night hung heavy in the memory of its inhabitants. Mary Briggs's confession had restored the cameo and the marble relief to their rightful places, yet Poirot's steady gaze betrayed no sense of finality. He lit a cigarette by the entrance hall, exhaling blue rings of smoke as he considered the puzzle's missing piece. Richard Hale, the dismissed footman whose duplicity had enabled Mary's misdeeds. Watson, Poirot murmured. We must pursue this fellow where he resides now, in the city's shadows. He will lead us to the heart of the conspiracy. Down the sweeping staircase, Dr. Watson joined him in the hall. The household was stirring. Colonel Fitzwilliam bade Lady Belhaven farewell for the morning hunt. Mrs. Edmonds marshalled her staff, and Mary, now relieved of her duties for a brief interval of reflection, watched with tearful gratitude as Poirot passed. "Fear not, child," he said gently, tipping his hat. "Your path to redemption begins with truth, but the truth must be complete. We seek Mr. Hale." Outside, the rain had ended, leaving only dank pavements and scattered leaves. Poirot pulled his overcoat tighter and set off with Watson toward the city. They took a hansom to London's City Road, winding through narrow streets lined with boarded shops and lodging-houses. Poirot consulted his notebook. Hale's last known address, tacked in faded ink, lay in a mews off Pentonville Road. Watson perched precariously on the seat as the cab lurched through puddles. "Do you really believe Hale will cooperate?" Watson asked. Poirot's moustaches twitched. "He will, mon ami, once he understands that his erstwhile jewel-dealer partner, Monsieur Duval, has already absconded with the real Botticino relief. Hale's loyalty is easily bought, but fear is a poor master. We shall use both." They arrived at a row of narrow three-story houses. The mews itself was eerily silent, save for the drip of water from rusty gutters. Poirot led Watson down a cobbled lane until they reached number 9, its door scarred by coal soot and chipped paint. He knocked discreetly. A panel slid apart, and the eye of a wary man peered out. The slender figure of Richard Hale recoiled, recognition and dread mingling in his expression. "Monsieur Poirot," Hale whispered, voice quavering, I was hoping you would not find me." Poirot produced his incisive smile. "Yet necessity compels us. Step aside, my friend, so we may speak in confidence." Inside, the mews. House was damp and sparsely furnished. A rickety table, 2 chairs, and a trunk in the corner. Hale shut the door and bolted it, hands shaking. Watson and Poirot seated themselves. Poirot lit a match and held it near the trunk. "Inside that trunk," he said, "I believe you will find the original marble relief, but not the cameo." Hale swallowed and lifted the lid, revealing the Botticino panel wrapped in oilskin, its carved figures glinting in the lamplight. "Yes," he said hoarsely. "Duval sent it here, but he never collected it. He vanished with the 3rd cameo and a promise to return for your footman's portion." Watson frowned. "He took the cameo again?" Hale nodded. "He recognized your intervention and fled, leaving me behind. I feared to confront him." Poirot leaned forward. Yet you enlisted Mary Briggs to do your bidding. You forged invoices to fund your duplicity. Hale pressed a hand to his chest. I needed the money. My debts were ruined by speculation in colonial bonds. I thought a small cut here, a quick sale there, would right my affairs. Poirot's gaze was measured. Crime of necessity or greed, the law is the law. He closed his eyes momentarily. But I offer you a choice. Help us recover Monsieur Duval and the cameo, and I will petition leniency for your cooperation. Refuse, and the full extent of your actions, past and present, will be laid before the magistrate. Hale looked from Poirot to Watson, desperation in his eyes. Finally he exhaled. I will help, monsieur. Tell me what must be done. Poirot's moustaches quivered with satisfaction. First, let us secure the marble relief. Do you trust my valet to transport it safely to Scotland Yard's evidence locker? Hale nodded. Yes, sir. But what of Duval? Poirot rose. He left a trail at Montague Street. We must inform Inspector Faraday and coordinate a stakeout. Duval may attempt to reclaim the cameo tonight. Watson stood as well, holstering his revolver. Then we shall return at once to Belhaven, secure Mary's well-being, and relay our new ally's information. Hale bowed his head. Thank you, monsieur. Poirot patted his shoulder. We walk this path together, mon ami, one of redemption and justice. They crossed the street to a waiting carriage, Hale clutching the relief to his chest as if it were both treasure and burden. Watson helped him settle inside, and they rattled back towards the Thames embankment. The city's lights shone against the river's surface, and London's hum accompanied their vigil. At Scotland Yard, the relief was logged into the property room with precise formality. Chain of custody established, seal applied. Watson noted the ledger entry. All accounted for. Poirot nodded. Yes. Now, let us plan our next move. That evening, Poirot convened with Inspector Faraday in the back office of Montague Street Gallery. The auction house was closed, its front windows shuttered. The two constables stationed there reported no unusual visitors since Duval's departure. Poirot spread Duval's auction paddle and a copy of the catalogue on the desk. Our French dealer has two obsessions, the Botticino relief and the cameo's authentic bezel. He may cross both paths again tonight. Faraday frowned. I will post plain clothes around the gallery and the coach-house in Belhaven grounds. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Excellent. And you, Watson, will accompany me back to the manor. Mary Briggs must be informed of Hale's cooperation, and Lady Belhaven deserves reassurance. Faraday snapped a salute. Consider it done. The moon rose high as Poirot and Watson returned to Belhaven, the carriage clopping beneath bare oaks. The manor was silent, windows dark except for two in Lady Belhaven's suite. Watson escorted the relief upstairs, while Poirot conferred with Lady Belhaven and Mrs. Edmonds by lamplight. Madame, Poirot said gently, Hale has betrayed his own co-conspirator. Tonight we will apprehend Duval, or force his hand. Lady Belhaven's eyes shone with relief. Thank you, monsieur. I cannot imagine my gratitude. Poirot inclined his head. Trust is hard to restore, but step by step we rebuild what was broken. With that, Poirot and Watson prepared their own vigil, placing a spare key in Fletcher's custody and entrusting the library passages to Mrs. Edmonds and the maid, now sworn to confidentiality. Midnight came as they stood beneath the east wing. Corridor, lanterns lit, constables posted at covert intervals, and Hale standing by with anxious hope. Watson looked to Poirot. "The moment approaches." Poirot smiled thinly. Indeed, the heart of the puzzle beats in the dark, ready to be discovered by those who seek truth with unwavering resolve. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Monsieur Etienne Duval, hat in hand, stride measured. He paused at the corridor's mouth, expression tense. Poirot stepped forward, cane raised. "Monsieur Duval, your duplicity ends tonight." Duval's face twisted with defiance. "Come nearer, detective. Let us see who is master of shadows." Poirot did not flinch. "Inspector Faraday," he called. From the gloom, plainclothes officers and a uniformed sergeant emerged, surrounding Duval. "You are under arrest for theft and conspiracy." Duval's shoulders slumped. Hale stepped forward, clutching his coat. "I will testify to all he has done, Monsieur Poirot." Duval's eyes flickered with regret. I had no choice." Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Choice is the measure of character, monsieur, and yours led you astray." As Duval was handcuffed, the cameo glimmered in Poirot's gloved hand, its authenticity confirmed by the guardian's fingerprint, once missing, now returned. Lady Belhaven emerged to witness the arrest, her gratitude shining as she embraced Mary Briggs, freed from suspicion. Colonel Fitzwilliam stood tall, offering his arm to the housekeeper, and Watson, ever by Poirot's side, watched the end of one conspiracy and the beginning of another day's promise. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky in rose and gold, Belhaven Manor had reclaimed its treasures and its trust. The Botticino, relief and the cameo rested once more beneath glass, secured by both locks, and the steadfast watch of hearts renewed. Poirot, standing at the threshold, inhaled the fresh morning air. "Mon ami," he said to Watson, "we have completed the final circle of this puzzle, yet London is vast. Tomorrow new enigmas await." Watson smiled. "Then let us be ready." Poirot tipped his head. "Always, Watson, for the little grey cells are ever vigilant." And with that, they returned inside, prepared for whatever mysteries the new day might bring. Chapter 6. The Hidden Inscription. The dawn sun cast long, pale shafts of light across the marble hall of Belhaven Manor as Hercule Poirot and Dr. Watson stepped through the great oaken doors. The house, once shaken by theft and deceit, now wore an air of cautious tranquillity, though its master and mistress had yet to find repose. Lady Belhaven awaited them in the gallery, draped in her afternoon shawl. The recovered cameo and marble, relief once more ensconced under glass. Poirot's eyes, however, lingered not on the treasures themselves, but on the butler's master key laid upon the velvet cushion, a silent testament to the footman's duplicity. "Mon ami," Poirot began, inclining his head to Lady Belhaven, "your losses have been recovered, and the conspirators brought to account. Yet I suspect the cameo's secret lies not only in its image, but in its original carving." He motioned to Watson, who retrieved a slender magnifying glass. Under its lens, The cameo's surface revealed a nearly invisible spiral of micro-engraved numerals and letters encircling the profile. Watson's eyes widened. A cipher, Poirot, one designed to remain hidden to the naked eye. Poirot's moustaches quivered. Indeed, my friend, our French dealer and his accomplices sought only the material value, yet the true prize may be an encoded map. To Belhaven's long-lost family vault, perhaps. Lady Belhaven pressed her hands together. My father told of a hidden chamber, built by our ancestors, filled with heirlooms and documents. Yet its entrance was lost with time. Poirot nodded gravely. The engraving on the cameo may supply the directions. We must decode it before any other hand seizes its secret. He summoned the household to witness the discovery. Colonel Fitzwilliam, Governess Miss Langford, Mrs. Edmonds, and even Mary Briggs, now restored to good standing. Before them, Poirot held the cameo aloft under the gallery lamp. Watson placed fine needles across the engraving, each resting at minute intervals along the spiral, numbering them 1 through 15. Beneath each needle lay a corresponding letter etched faintly in the frame. As Watson recorded each letter, MAPROOMTWELFINE, it formed the words Map Room 12 Fine. Poirot translated with a glint in his eye. Map Room 12 Fine. The 12th Gallery's Chamber of Prints, designated Map Room, and Fine, indicating the panel above the frieze. Lady Belhaven murmured, "We have a map room in the Manor's library, carved by my great-grandfather. He named it the Map Room, intending for it to hold his survey of land grants." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Then we proceed there at once." In the library, a narrow chamber beyond the east wing, the map room stood lined with antique cartography, charts of estate boundaries, engraved surveys, and a central alcove crowned by a faded oil painting of Sir Augustin Belhaven, the original surveyor. Poirot examined the frieze above the alcove, a timber panel inlaid with slim brass letters spelling 12 Fine. Beneath, the baseboard bore a subtle seam. Watson produced his folding rule and tapped the panel with the wooden end. "A hollow," Tone replied. Poirot traced a gloved finger along the seam and pressed at its midpoint. With a soft click, the panel swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a dark staircase descending into the earth. Torch in hand, Watson led the way, his lantern's glow illuminating rough stone steps strewn with motes of dust. Poirot followed, cane tapping in measured rhythm. At the foot of the stairs, they emerged into a vaulted crypt carved from the same sandstone as the manor's foundations. Faded heraldic shields in relief adorned the walls, bearing the Belhaven arms, 3 wolves passant against a field of azure. A narrow corridor bisected the space, lit by iron sconces housing unlit candles. Watson paused at a central dais, a stone altar upon which rested an iron-bound chest secured by a 3-tumbler lock. Poirot knelt to examine its lid. "No key will open this," he murmured. "But our cipher continues." The cameo's reverse bears one final inscription: Hearthkeeper's Gift. The hearth room, your own sitting room, harbours the final clue. They hurried up the stairs and returned to the great salon, where the hearth fire still smouldered. The mantelpiece bore ornate carvings of hearth gods and a row of brass fire tools. Poirot retrieved the poker and struck the hearth's red brick at a precise point. the same numerals from the cameo's spiral. 14. A brick dislodged, revealing a square cavity. Watson reached inside and drew forth an iron ring. Poirot attached it to the chest's lock, whereupon the tumblers clicked open. The chest creaked as its lid was raised. Inside lay old parchment scrolls, the original Belhaven estate charters, deeds of land grants, and a collection of heirloom jewellery wrapped in oilskin. Among them, Nestlé's 17th century signet ring crowned the trove, and nestled beside it the cameo itself, engraved on its reverse with the original family crest. Lady Belhaven stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "These are my ancestors' treasures, lost to time until now." Poirot bowed his head. "Your family's legacy has been preserved by no small feat. The synergy of heart, mind, and the little grey cells. As daylight filtered through the cracks of the crypt's narrow windows, they gathered around the chest. Colonel Fitzwilliam reverently held the signet ring, contemplating its weight of history. Miss Langford traced the edges of a charter with gentle fingers. Mrs. Edmonds knelt beside the heirloom jewellery with tender reverence. Mary Briggs, standing at the doorway, offered a silent apology through her bowed head. Poirot glanced at her. "It took courage to confess your part. Now witness the true cost of secrecy and the reward of restitution." Mary's eyes lifted, shining with renewed hope. They returned to the library with the chest, where the contents were carefully catalogued and conserved. Dr. Watson noted each item: the scroll's brittle edges, the signet ring's patina, the cameo's immaculate relief, while Poirot oversaw its secure placement in the Manor's private vault. "True security," Poirot observed, "lies not in mere locks and keys, but in the transparency of purpose and the integrity of those entrusted." That evening, the household gathered for a private dinner in the oak-panelled dining room, where Lady Belhaven proposed a toast. "To the return of our heritage, and to Monsieur Poirot, whose insight has restored more than property, but also our faith in one another." Glasses raised, they drank, the bonds of trust reforged over wine and candlelight. Later, as the Manor sank into quiet sleep, Poirot and Watson strolled the moonlit terrace. Watson noted the autumn leaves swirling in soft eddies. "Another mystery," resolved Poirot, "and one that preserved both treasure and tradition." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Mon ami, the greatest mysteries are those of the heart and history. Tonight, both have found their resolution within the little grey cells and the warmth of human compassion." Watson smiled. "Then let us rest, for tomorrow awaits fresh puzzles." Poirot tipped his head toward the constellations above. "Indeed, Watson, and London's secrets lie yet uncovered." Together they returned across the threshold, leaving Belhaven Manor's hidden vaults at peace once more. Chapter 7. The Council's Conspiracy. The dawn light spilled silver across the dew-damp gardens of Belhaven Manor as guests arrived for the day's extraordinary gathering. Lady Belhaven, resplendent in a gown of deep sapphire, stood upon the terrace to welcome the trustees of England's Antiquarian Trust, each bearing letters patent and intentions of public stewardship. Hercule Poirot and Dr. Watson stood too, one side, quietly observing the procession of lords, ladies, and scholars as they passed beneath the marble portico. Yesterday's triumph Recovering the cameo, the marble relief, and the hidden family vault belonged to history. Today's assembly would shape the treasure's future. Yet Poirot's moustaches quivered with unease. In the great gallery, beneath the vault's reconstructed skylight, Lady Belhaven led the Trust's chairman, Lord Wycliffe, toward the iron-bound chest now open upon its pedestal. Within lay the carefully catalogued heirlooms, medieval charters, Renaissance jewellery, the signet ring, and at the centre the cameo beside the small Botticino panel. Tablet-style nameplates identified each object. A pair of uniformed guards flanked the display. Watson marshalled the papers recording the chain of custody, while Dr. Kessler, representing the British Museum, examined the seals upon the locks. Lord Wycliffe, a portly gentleman with pince-nez glasses, began, "Madam, your generosity in entrusting these artefacts to our care is without parallel. We propose to incorporate them into a national collection here, with supplemental exhibitions at London and the provinces." Murmurs of approval rippled among the trustees. Miss Langford, invited as Lady Belhaven's archival consultant, recorded each word. Mrs. Edmonds offered trays of refreshment nearby, and Mary Briggs circulated tea and biscuits with trembling composure. At the far end, Colonel Fitzwilliam stood sentry by the now closed vault doorway, musket-stock cane in hand. Lord Wycliffe tapped his gavel. "Before we proceed to formal signatures, let us conduct a final inspection of each item. Please, Dr. Kessler, verify the seals." She drew a small brass key and unlocked the cameo's glass dome. Watson removed his gloved hand from the cameo and held it aloft. The trustees leaned in. "As recorded, cameo and relief intact," Dr. Kessler affirmed. The velvet-cushioned Botticino panel followed, then the signet ring. No one yet noticed the hush that settled as Mary Briggs crossed behind the display, purse clutched at her waist. When the last object was recased, Lord Wycliffe called for quills. A long mahogany table, covered in green cloth, bore heavy parchment, deeds. Lady Belhaven signed her name with flourish. Others followed. Poirot offered his pen with a courteous bow. Watson observed that Miss Langford's gaze flickered toward Mary Briggs's purse, as though the girl's nerves betrayed her. Poirot's keen eyes noted a lavender stain upon the maid's cuff, an echo of the perfumes that had once masked Mary's fingerprints. He filed the detail mentally. As the final signatures dried, Lord Wycliffe invited the company to a luncheon in the dining hall. Mary Briggs slipped away toward the service wing, and Mrs. Edmonds followed her with concern. Poirot, sensing a thread yet unwoven, approached Miss Langford. "You remarked upon Mary's purse," he murmured. She nodded. "I saw her clutch something, a folded paper, then hide it when she thought no one watched." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "We must retrieve that paper before any more mischief." He motioned to Watson. "Will you detain the luncheon start? I shall intercept our maid." Watson stepped forward, arousing polite attention by praising the luncheon's menu, allowing Poirot to slip away. Down a narrow corridor, Poirot hurried, following the faint scrape of Mary's shoes on the tiled floor. He cornered her near the linen closets. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "I hope I do not startle you." Mary froze, hands pressed to her bosom. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, I should not." Poirot produced a slender lantern. You carry a note?" Mary's eyes filled. "Yes, I found it beneath the display table. I meant to return it to you." She extended a folded scrap of parchment. Poirot took it gently and unfolded the script. The flowing hand spoke of a clandestine offer. The Botticino panel and cameo were to be exchanged tonight at Montague's Lost and Found auction house, delivered by a trusted courier. The courier would arrive between 10 and 11. Payment in silver and secrecy assured the fief seller's identity would remain hidden. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A final bid on your treasures, before they leave these walls." Mary burst into tears. I did it to help, but I knew it was wrong. Please do not let them go." Poirot offered a gentle handkerchief. "You have done well to reveal this. Now we must set a trap." Returning to Watson, Poirot revealed the note. Montague's Lost and Found, an auction house specializing in unclaimed luggage and estate leftovers. Watson frowned. "They operate from a basement near Covent Garden." Poirot nodded. "We shall notify Inspector Faraday and arrange for a bailiff's presence at the premises tonight." He paused. "And Mary Briggs will remain under Mrs. Edmonds's watch, so the courtyard remains undisturbed." Mary wiped her eyes as Mrs. Edmonds led her away. Watson clapped Poirot's shoulder. "Bravo, Poirot!" The evening came with a cold wind scouring the streets. Poirot, Watson, and Inspector Faraday, in plain clothes, assembled outside Montague's Lost and Found auction house, disguised as a tobacconist's storefront. Across the narrow lane, a bailiff waited, and 2 constables loitered by the side. The door. Poirot checked his gold pocket watch. 10:15 p.m. At the appointed hour, a cab pulled up. The driver knocked twice, once to the front door, once to the side. Faraday signalled, and the bailiff advanced, flanked by the constables. From the cab emerged Colonel Fitzwilliam, using his military bearing to assert quiet authority. He led the driver, who carried a large wooden crate marked "Antique Ceramics. Handle with care." The driver proffered a letter. "To the auctioneer. Please process immediately as lot A37. The bailiff read the letter and signalled the inspectors forward. The side door swung open, admitting the group into a dimly lit basement with rickety shelves. Before them stood the auctioneer's clerk, who bowed nervously. "Gentlemen," the clerk stammered, "lot A37 awaits confirmation." Poirot stepped forward. "Show us the lot." The clerk led them to a small table, upon which rested 2 crates, one labelled ceramics, the other unmarked. He pried open the crate labelled with the auction house's name. Inside lay decaying plates and shards, no cameo, no marble relief. The clerk swallowed. "Another crate?" Poirot raised a gloved hand. "Aha!" He turned to the constables. "Open the second crate." They swung aside its lid to reveal the Botticino panel, and the cameo displayed side by side upon velvet. Watson exhaled. "They've fulfilled the order, yet thought the switch foolproof." Faraday moved to detain the clerk, but Poirot lifted a finger. "Not yet." From the shadows, a figure emerged. Monsieur Etienne Duval himself, hat in, hand jacket open to reveal lavender-stained cuffs. He levelled a pistol at the group. "Stand back, Inspector, or I'll shatter these crates, and your case along with them." Poirot advanced, cane tapping the floor. "Monsieur Duval, you have stolen once connived again, and now threaten violence. Surrender the pistol. Duval's eyes gleamed. I'll not be denied again. Just as the pistol rose, a cry of police echoed from the stairwell. A second bailiff and 2 more constables stormed in, pinning Duval against the wall. The pistol clattered to the floor. Poirot retrieved the weapon. Too late, monsieur. Duval slumped in defeat. I had to recover my investment. Colonel Fitzwilliam stepped forward. On the authority of Belhaven Manor, you are under arrest for theft and conspiracy. Duval nodded miserably. Yes, Colonel. The constables led him away, cuffs gleaming in the lantern light. Poirot turned to Watson. The final act is played. All pieces are now on the board. Watson smiled wearily. Then let us return to Belhaven and close this chapter. The bailiff placed the crates on a cart for safe transport. As they emerged onto the misty street, the cameo, and relief secure once more, Poirot paused beneath the auction house's gas lamps. The missing fingerprint was but the prologue, Watson. Today we have unveiled the conspiracy in full, through observation, deduction, and the little grey cells. Watson nodded. And tomorrow the world will know the tale of Belhaven's treasures, restored and sanctified. Poirot tipped his hat to the receding figure of the arrested dealer. Indeed, Watson, another puzzle resolved, and another testament to the triumph of truth over deceit. Chapter 8. The Trust's Hidden Agenda Week had passed since the triumphant reunion of the Belhaven heirlooms in the private vault beneath the gallery. Yet a hush still prevailed over the grand halls of Belhaven Manor. The air, even in daylight, carried a faint echo of midnight conferences and whispered betrayals. Lady Belhaven had graciously hosted the Antiquarian Trust's inaugural meeting, and the public exhibition of the scarab pendant and Botticino relief was due to open in a fortnight. Yet Hercule Poirot's piercing gaze betrayed that he sensed a greater storm brewing beneath the surface of courtesy and civility. The morning sun poured through the tall, mullioned windows of the council chamber, illuminating a semicircle of polished teak tables arranged for the trustees. Lady Belhaven presided, her posture regal, while Dr. Marjorie Kessler represented the British Museum, her notes neatly arrayed. Colonel Fitzwilliam and Miss Langford, now appointed as guardians of the Belhaven archives, sat to one side attentive and vigilant. The chairman, Lord Wycliffe, exchanged polite banter with Lady Belhaven as he prepared his opening remarks. Watson watched the scene from the doorway, hand resting on his cane, while Poirot lingered behind him, eyes narrowing as he studied each member in turn. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lord Wycliffe began, voice rich with cultivated authority, "it is my honour to welcome you to the public unveiling of these extraordinary artefacts. Thanks to Lady Belhaven's generosity, London's finest scholars and enthusiasts will soon behold treasures long shrouded in secrecy." Applause rippled around the chamber, yet Poirot's moustaches twitched. He noted with interest that Wycliffe's left hand brushed the lapel of his jacket in a subtle, almost compulsive gesture, an action repeated whenever a certain name was mentioned. After the formalities, Lord Wycliffe adjourned the meeting for refreshments. Amid the clink of porcelain and murmured conversations, Poirot took Watson's arm and slipped past the clusters of guests. "My friend," he murmured, "have you noticed Lord Wycliffe's manner when he spoke of generosity?" Watson frowned. Indeed. A slight tremor in his left hand, as though recalling a lost opportunity. Poirot led him to a pair of tall windows overlooking the gardens. I believe our good lord harbours a secret ambition, one that extends beyond public service. He pulled a slip of paper from his waistcoat. This anonymous note arrived just before dawn. He who signed the trust deed shall forsake a heirloom for debt. Look to the scales of justice. Watson's brow furrowed. A threat or a clue? Poirot's eyes glittered. Perhaps both. They returned to the refreshments, where Lady Belhaven offered them coffee. Poirot accepted with a nod. Madame, I wish to inquire, did Lord Wycliffe's signature on the trust deed appear as he intended, or was there an addendum you discovered only later? Lady Belhaven's gentle composure flickered. I signed, after reviewing the trust instrument with our solicitor. No footnotes, no codicils, only my endowment of the artefacts to the trust for public exhibition. Poirot's moustaches quivered, and yet the note suggests any deviation in Lord Wycliffe's oath might trigger a secret clause, one that demands forfeiture. She shook her head. Impossible. Our solicitor is beyond reproach. Poirot inclined his head. Yet we must verify, madam. The architect of charity may yet conspire to profit. He signalled Watson to observe Lord Wycliffe conversing with the solicitor, Mr. Pembroke, in the corner. We shall follow him. They drifted among the guests until they reached Pembroke. A prim man in his 60s, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. Poirot intercepted them as they paused beside a display case of medieval charters. "Mr. Pembroke, a moment?" he asked. The solicitor bowed. "Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist?" Poirot produced the earlier note. "Did you draft any clause hidden from Lady Belhaven? One that threatens avarice if a debt remains unpaid?" Pembroke's spectacles glinted. He adjusted them with trembling fingers. "I drafted nothing of the sort. The instrument is straightforward. Lady Belhaven's endowment shall not be voided by debt or default. Any such clause would violate public trust." Watson probed gently. Then perhaps the clause resides in another document. Pembroke's face paled. He shook his head. "No, monsieur. There is only one deed." Poirot replaced the note in his pocket. "Thank you. Yet I shall have the deed examined anew." As they moved away, Watson whispered, "He lies, Poirot." His hand quivered more than Wycliffe's. Poirot nodded grimly. "The solicitor covers the trust's secret. We must find the document that binds the heirs to forfeiture, or discover the hidden creditor who demands payment." The luncheon bell summoned the guests back to the dining hall. Over roast pheasant and Madeira, Lord Wycliffe delivered a spirited address on cultural patrimony, his left hand gripping the edge of the table. Poirot observed him keenly, noting a slender envelope concealed beneath Wycliffe's placemat. Miss Langford, seated next to Lady Belhaven, caught Poirot's eye and discreetly shrugged. She had handled the council papers that morning and could confirm whether any extra pages had been inserted. Poirot nodded imperceptibly, and Miss Langford casually retrieved the envelope under pretext of offering Wycliffe a fresh napkin. As the guests rose from table, Miss Langford handed Poirot a folded sheet, the missing page of the trust deed, bearing a tiny notarial seal and the faint signature of Belhaven's solicitor. Yet half its text glowed with interlineations. A clause stating that if Lady Belhaven failed to meet her husband's outstanding financial obligations, her contribution to the trust would pass to his private creditors, with Lord Wycliffe named en force. Watson took the paper, aghast. This is a forfeiture clause, designed to strip the estate should debt be proven. Poirot tapped his cane. Precisely, and Wycliffe and Pembroke both colluded to bind the heir in servitude. He pocketed the page. We must confront them and annul this secret covenant. In the hush before afternoon tea, Poirot requested Lady Belhaven's presence in the library. There, beneath the portrait of Sir Augustin Belhaven, Poirot laid out the amended clause and explained its implications. The trust was a mere facade to safeguard assets from creditors, while Wycliffe and Pembroke enriched themselves by threatening forfeiture. Lady Belhaven's eyes filled with tears. How could they betray me so? I trusted him. Poirot inclined his head. They betrayed us all, madam, but we shall unmask their scheme. He instructed Watson to fetch Colonel Fitzwilliam and the solicitor, Mr. Pembroke. The colonel appeared at the library door, his expression resolute. "Madam, I shall see Lord Wycliffe at once." Pembroke entered moments later, his face ashen, when Poirot produced the incriminating page. "You drafted this?" Poirot asked calmly. Pembroke hesitated, then stammered, I was instructed." Poirot's gaze sharpened on Lady Belhaven. She turned to Lord Wycliffe, who had appeared in the doorway with an air of wounded dignity. Wycliffe drew himself erect, voice measured. "My lady, you must forgive me. I acted to preserve your family's fortune. Your husband's debts threatened to force a sale of the manor." Lady Belhaven's lips trembled. "By binding my gift, you sought to extort more than charity can bear." Colonel Fitzwilliam stepped forward. "My lord, your actions constitute fraud. You shall stand before the magistrate." Wycliffe's shoulders sank. "Then I accept your judgment, yet I implore you, spare the reputation of this house." Lady Belhaven's voice was steady. "I shall forgive you, Reginald Wycliffe, for the sake of preserving what remains. But the clause is void, and Pembroke, you shall restore the deed to its original form." She turned to the solicitor. "Do so at once." Pembroke bowed his head. "Yes, madam." With the secret covenant annulled, Poirot summoned the assembled household to witness the restoration of the trust deed to its rightful state. Quills flew across the page as Pembroke obliterated the interlineations, relocked the original deed, and affixed his signature without the black clause. Lady Belhaven then signed with a steady hand, before turning to Poirot. "Monsieur, you have preserved not only our treasures, but our honour." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, truth and justice must be the lodestars of stewardship." He turned to Watson. "Shall we conclude our work?" Watson smiled. Indeed, that evening, Belhaven Manor glowed under the harvest moon. The yew, cameo, and relief rested peacefully under their glass, guardian spirits in the gallery. Poirot and Watson sat in the library beside the hearth, the amended trust deed tucked safely into Lady Belhaven's writing desk. Watson poured 2 glasses of sherry. Another conspiracy laid bare Poirot, this time by the pen rather than the blade. Poirot twirled his glass. "Yes, mon ami, for the greatest artefacts of all are the promises we make, and those we keep. Now let us rest. for London's mysteries will again summon us soon." As the fire crackled, the two friends raised their glasses to the triumph of integrity, and the manor stood sentinel over its treasures, secure in the knowledge that the Trust's true guardians had at last prevailed. Chapter 9. The Night of the Grand Exhibition. The evening of the Grand Exhibition arrived with an uncommon crispness in the air, as though London itself had drawn a sudden breath before the unveiling of Belhaven Manor's greatest treasures. The oak-panelled galleries had been transformed into a ballroom of light and colour. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, casting prisms on gleaming parquet floors. Swathes of velvet drapes framed each vitrine, and the Arcadian scent of white roses hovered as softly as whispered anticipations. A chorus of well-dressed guests, their gowns and waistcoats glittering, drifted through the salon, while Poirot and Watson, in impeccable evening dress, greeted each arrival with discreet courtesy. Lady Belhaven, radiant in emerald silk, took her place before the central display, where the scarab pendant and Botticino relief rested together under a single crystal dome. Stillness rippled through the crowd as she stepped forward. "My friends," she began, voice clear, "tonight we celebrate not only the recovery of these precious relics, but the triumph of truth and trust over darkness and deceit." Applause rose, and Poirot's moustaches twitched in satisfaction as he surveyed the smiling faces. Yet beneath the polished civility he caught the glint of concealed anxieties, eyes too keen, gestures too practised. As Lady Belhaven concluded her address, Dr. Marjorie Kessler moved to the podium beside her. "I have the honour of declaring this exhibition open," she said, lowering the dome's latch with ceremonial precision. The crystal lifted on a soft sigh, revealing the treasures within. The assembled guests leaned forward, breathless, as soft music began from an unseen quartet. Watson whispered, "The moment is complete." Poirot nodded, yet even as the amber glow illuminated the ancient carvings, he felt a tingle of foreboding. The first hour passed in a flourish of polite interest. Dignitaries examined the pendants, scholars debated their iconography, and Lady Belhaven received bouquets of congratulations. Poirot mingled discreetly, observing every rustle of silk and glint of cufflink. He noted that the solicitor Pembroke lingered too long before the relief, and that Colonel Fitzwilliam's posture remained taut, as though ready at any moment to spring into action. Miss Langford moved among the guests with serene efficiency, guiding them from case to case, while Mrs. Edmonds circulated trays of petit fours. At 11 o'clock, as Poirot and Watson paused by a side alcove, Inspector Faraday approached with a grave expression. "Monsieur Poirot, I regret to report an incident." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Speak, Inspector." Faraday led them toward the far end of the gallery, where a cluster of officers and museum attendants had gathered. In the centre stood the empty dome, its crystal shattered, the Botticino relief gone, its velvet cushion left unsullied and unwrapped. Gasps rippled through the guests as a constable held aloft a single fragment of marble. Poirot knelt beside the case, examining the jagged edge of the display box. "Again, the glass shattered from within," he murmured. He retrieved a shard and traced its fracture. Only a force applied to the underside could release the dome. And once more, no fingerprint, but for this faint smear of lavender. He turned to Inspector Faraday. "See that the guests remain in the gallery. No one leaves. I shall have my little grey cells pursue the thief immediately." Watson added, "And we must protect Lady Belhaven's dignity. No panic." As constables secured the entrances, Poirot summoned Mary Briggs, who had been rebuked earlier for her part in the Trust's conspiracy, but retained by Lady Belhaven for her knowledge of the household. Mary appeared at his side, tears in her eyes. "Monsieur, I heard a noise by the west door." Poirot tapped his cane. "Good. Describe it." Mary trembled as she spoke. A soft click, and then the dome released itself from the brass. "Catches?" Poirot nodded. "And no one saw the thief for that instant?" Mary shook her head. "No, monsieur." Poirot released his breath. "Then we must divide our force. Watson, secure the guests. I will investigate the west door." Dr. Watson guided the anxious assembly toward a side vestibule, offering words of reassurance and discreet refreshment. Meanwhile, Poirot advanced to the gallery's west entrance, a heavy bronze door set beneath a carved tympanum. He examined the lock. No sign of tampering, no pick marks. He pressed the door and found it latched from within. He turned to a constable. This door was secured, yet only one person could open it from the inside. He paused before the sculpted relief. Above the arch, a winged sphinx. "Look closely, Watson," he called. "There is a small button concealed in the wing's curve." Watson, having joined him, knelt to inspect the carving, while the constables watched in polite curiosity. Under Poirot's instruction, Watson pressed the button. The Sphinx's head tilted slightly, and a hidden latch clicked. The door swung inward on secret hinges to reveal a narrow service corridor lined with marble mosaic tiles. Tiles that glimmered with lavender dust. Watson gasped as he saw a single set of footprints leading into the corridor. Poirot examined them. One pair, size small. Not a gentleman's gait, but light, feminine. He turned to Watson. "Mary Briggs pointed us true. Follow the trail." They stepped into the corridor, careful to avoid disturbing the dust. At its end, a slender door bore the emblem of the Trust, crossed quills beneath an open book. Poirot tapped the frame. "They have taken the marble relief through there, perhaps to rendezvous with a buyer within the Trust's own chamber." He gestured. "Open it, Watson." The doctor applied his shoulder. The door gave way to reveal the council's private suite, a set of offices behind the main chamber, furnished in dark wood and lined with file cabinets. The tables bore oversized ledgers and sample contracts, one of which lay open on a side table. Poirot advanced, picking up the contract. "Here is the elephant in the room, a clandestine agreement between Lord Wycliffe and the secret collector, promising the Botticino relief in exchange for silence. This document bears Wycliffe's signature in identical ink to the trust deed's forgery." Watson looked over his shoulder. Then the chairman betrayed both Lady Belhaven and the trust's principals. Poirot nodded. "Yes, mon ami. He orchestrated the theft to extort payment from a private syndicate, using Mary as a pawn and securing the trust's treasury as collateral." From a cabinet, Poirot withdrew the relief, even more precious for its context. "Shall we return this to the gallery and confront Lord Wycliffe?" Watson produced handcuffs. "With pleasure." They reassembled the relief upon its velvet cushion in the now quiet gallery, where the guests waited in respectful gloom. Poirot stepped before them, commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to interrupt your evening, but justice demands due course." He produced the ledger and forgery. "Lord Wycliffe, you stand accused of collusion with criminals to betray your trust." A murmur rippled through the crowd, faces blanching. Wycliffe, pale and trembling, stepped forward. I acted to preserve the trust's endowment," he stammered. Poirot's voice was firm. "By dishonour, monsieur, your signature bound Lady Belhaven's gifts to the whims of private creditors. Then you staged this theft to satisfy your conspirators." Wycliffe's shoulders sagged. "Yes, I confess. I believed only I could protect the collection." He lowered his head. "I am prepared to face the magistrate." Lady Belhaven, expression resolute, stepped beside Poirot. "This trust will be reconstituted under new governance. Let the public's heritage be guarded by those of incorruptible character." Dr. Kessler nodded gravely, and Colonel Fitzwilliam signalled the constables. Wycliffe was escorted away in disgrace. The relief remained safe, gleaming under its dome. Watson placed a steadying hand upon Lady Belhaven's arm. "All is right once more, madame." Poirot returned to Watson in the empty gallery, where the Botticino panel and the cameo stood reunited. "The Trust's hidden agenda has been undone," he observed. Watson smiled, and the final conspiracy laid bare. Poirot tapped his cane twice on the marble floor. "Thus the little grey cells prevail, and truth emerges triumphant. Now, mon ami, let us take our leave. Belhaven's treasures shall rest under honest guardianship at last." Outside the dawn broke afresh, and London stirred anew, its shadowed intrigues laid to rest beneath the promise of a clear, honest day. Chapter 10. Curtain Call for Belhaven's Treasures. The grand hall of Belhaven Manor had been transformed into a dazzling exhibition space by the time evening's guests arrived. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, velvet banners bearing the Belhaven arms draped the walls, and polished marble floors reflected the glimmer of silken gowns and polished boots. Rows of gleaming display cases showcased the heirloom treasures, most prominently the scarab pendant and the Botticino relief reunited under a single dome. On a dais at the hall's centre, Lady Belhaven stood poised beside Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Watson, and Dr. Marjorie Kessler, while a hush fell as the assembled dignitaries and scholars awaited the formal opening. Lady Belhaven raised her hand, her sapphire gown catching the lamplight. "Welcome, my friends, to this day of renewal and trust. These artefacts, long hidden and long threatened, now stand restored to their rightful place, open to all who cherish history and beauty." Applause rang through the hall, and Poirot, standing unobtrusively among the guests, inclined his head in measured satisfaction. He wore evening dress as immaculate as ever, his moustaches a study in composure. By his side, Dr. Watson offered a supportive smile. The faithful chronicler pleased to see the manor's treasures at last secure. The inaugural tour was guided by Dr. Kessler, who explained each piece with erudition and warmth. She lingered over the charters detailing the family's Norman holdings, then turned to the Renaissance jewellery, fine chains and pearl pendants once worn by Lady Belhaven's ancestors. At the cameo and relief, The crowd leaned in to admire the subtle engraving and delicate carving. Watson watched their faces, noting the wonder and curiosity mirrored in every eye. Even the most jaded collector found something to marvel at when confronted by true genius. Behind the scenes, Colonel Fitzwilliam oversaw security with discreet efficiency. Former conspirators, Mary Briggs and Mr. Hale, now served in trusted positions under his gentle supervision, Mary tending the flower arrangements that scented the galleries, and Hale cataloguing the new ledgers, recording every visitor. The Ushmaid, redemption stood as living proof that mistakes could be atoned for by honest service. Poirot caught Mary's eye as she passed, nodding encouragement. She returned his glance with a shy, grateful smile. As the evening advanced, refreshments were served in an adjoining saloon. Crystal flutes of champagne tinkled, and trays of delicate canapés circulated. Poirot and Watson found themselves beside Lady Belhaven, who sipped tea with serene relief. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I cannot thank you enough. Without your little grey cells, this evening would never have come to pass." Poirot returned her gratitude with gentle humility. "Madame, it has been my privilege. Justice tempered with mercy has safeguarded not only these treasures, but the very spirit of Belhaven." Suddenly, a ripple of conversation moved through the crowd. An elderly gentleman in spectacles had paused before the iron-bound chest that once concealed the family vault, drawn by an uncanny resonance between its brass fittings and a similar chest he'd seen in Venice. He tapped the brass with his knuckle and produced a faded fragment of map, an old Venetian land registry that named Belhaven as a borrower of Byzantine manuscripts. "Ah," he said to those around, "the Belhaven lineage stretches far beyond Norman shires." Poirot, overhearing, offered a bow. "Indeed, sir. The Belhaven vault held many such tokens, dispersed by marriage and war, now slowly reunited." The gentleman smiled. A monumental effort. Meanwhile, Dr. Watson was approached by a young art student named Clara Reeves, who held a sketchbook brimming with studies of the Botticino relief. "Dr. Watson," she said breathlessly, "I would sketch every detail of that relief. May I request additional time after the exhibition closes?" Watson beamed. "Proceed, Miss Reeves. Your devotion honours our cause." He informed Dr. Kessler, who arranged a private viewing for the student, believing that inspiration spurred by these relics would fuel the next generation of scholars and artists. As the clock neared 10, Lady Belhaven invited her guests back to the central hall. Soft music filled the air as she prepared to deliver her final remarks. The assembled company gathered beneath the towering portraits of Sir Augustin and Lady Grace Belhaven, whose stern features looked serenely down upon the scene. Poirot noted that even the iron gaze of ancestral oil paintings seemed softened by the warm glow of the chandeliers. "My friends," Lady Belhaven began, voice carrying across the hall, "tonight demonstrates that heritage is not measured solely by stone and scroll, but by the bonds of trust that link past and present. Let us carry forward this legacy with candour, compassion, and vigilance, ensuring that no shadow may ever again threaten these treasures or the hearts that guard them." A ripple of applause followed, louder this time. A standing ovation from nobles and laymen alike. As the guests dispersed into the night, Poirot and Watson stood by the open windows, lantern light framing their silhouettes against the dark gardens beyond. Watson turned to his companion. "The exhibition has been a triumph, Poirot, yet I suspect you remain vigilant for any loose ends." Poirot's eyes sparkled with quiet mirth. "Mon ami, mysteries are like ivy upon the walls. They twine and conceal even when the surface seems clear. Let us observe the final moments." He glanced back at the gallery, where one last figure stood alone by the cameo display. Mr. Pembroke, the solicitor, his gaze fixed upon the cameo's engraving. His hand trembled, as though recalling past duplicities. Poirot took a gentle breath and approached the solicitor. "Mr. Pembroke," he said, voice low and courteous, "I trust you are satisfied that the trust deeds have been properly restored." Pembroke started, then managed a weary smile. "Indeed, monsieur, all matters are in order." Poirot studied him for a moment. "Your service has been invaluable, yet I have one request. Ensure that your records are preserved in perpetuity, not buried in secrecy." Pembroke nodded gravely. "I shall do so." Poirot inclined his head. "Then we may always hold you to your word." Night deepened as the last carriage rolled away. Lady Belhaven, flanked by Colonel Fitzwilliam, invited Poirot and Watson to join her on the terrace. The moon, low and luminous, cast silver shadows across the lawns. The pond gleamed like quicksilver, rippling in the gentle breeze. Lady Belhaven took a soft step forward, inhaling the night air. "I feel as though a great weight has lifted, yet also that a new responsibility rests upon my shoulders." Poirot offered her a small nod. "Madame, the preservation of history requires a vigilant heart and open hands. You have both." Watson added, "and friends to guide you." Lady Belhaven clasped their hands in gratitude. As the trio gazed out at the silent manor, Poirot allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph. Another puzzle solved, another legacy protected. Yet he knew that the world beyond Belhaven's gates was rife with enigmas yet unsolved. He patted his waistcoat, feeling the familiar weight of his notebook. "Come, Watson," he whispered, "let us return to Baker Street. London's mysteries call once more." Watson took his arm, and together they walked beneath the moonlit elms, leaving behind the grand hall's shining treasures, and the promise that truth, though tested, would always prevail under the vigilant watch of the little grey cells. Chapter 11. The final Seal Belhaven Manor lay silent beneath a silver dawn when Dr. Watson and I arrived at the gallery shortly before breakfast. The champagne of last night's gala still lingered in the guests' memory, its effervescence a fine metaphor for triumph. Yet as we opened the heavy oak door, a chill of apprehension gripped me. The last heirloom, the ancient Belhaven signet ring from the Norman line, was missing. Not under glass for public display, but kept in the private vault. It had vanished overnight. Watson's brow furrowed. "Surely the ring was left under lock and key all night, Poirot." I nodded. "Indeed, mon ami. Yet the most cunning thieves leave no sign at all." We summoned Colonel Fitzwilliam and Mrs. Edmonds, whose watchful eye had protected the vault, and asked them to recount the night's events. Colonel Fitzwilliam's tall frame filled the doorway of the gallery's inner room. "Monsieur Poirot, I inspected the vault at 11. The bolt was secure, the dial unchanged. I departed at 1:30, to join Mrs. Henrystone for late tea. Mrs. Edmonds added softly, I performed my final round at midnight, checking each case. The vault door was locked, no disturbance. Watson peered at the vault's brass dial. The numbers were still aligned at 3 to 7 to 2, the combination we had set for safety. Yet the ring was gone. Who else knew the combination? I asked. Mrs. Edmonds's gaze flicked to Lady Belhaven's door. Only Madame, the Colonel, and myself. I tapped my cane. Then one of you slept while the ring walked free, or someone else knows the secret. We widened our circle. Mary Briggs and Richard Hale, both now trusted householders, were questioned and exonerated at once by their alibis and evident shock. But one figure struck me as uneasy. Miss Langford, the governess and archival consultant, lingered near the case of medieval charters, her gaze fixed on the empty pedestal. I invited her into the gallery. Miss Langford, I said kindly, you have seen more of these documents than any of us. Did you happen to notice the ring's setting or its housing in the vault? She pressed her lips together. Monsieur, I admired the ring's filigree, yet I saw no signs of removal this morning. Her hand fluttered to the neckline of her gown, revealing a faint violet smudge at the cuff. Watson sank a glance. Forgive us, but have you handled lavender this morning? She recoiled. No, I was up late cataloguing burials in the archives, then washed my hands. Yet the stain remained. I directed Watson to examine Miss Langford's Carol-embroidered sleeve, while I inspected the vault's threshold. There on the marble floor lay a single lavender petal, crushed. It had the same scent we'd used to mislead the thieves of the cameo. Watson held it to his nose, perfumed and out of place in the vault corridor. I stooped and traced my fingers along the baseboard beside the hidden latch that revealed the secret stairway to the crypt. Watson joined me, and together we recalled how the cameos, the Botticino relief, and the ring cipher had once united to open the family vault. The combination 3 to 7 2 had unlocked the signet's case, but the crypt's mechanism responded to its twin, the heart of Ma'at's inverted code, 273. The ring itself, I said, holds the final key, one last seal awaiting its bearer. As morning sunlight filtered through the high windows, I summoned Lady Belhaven. She appeared, draped in morning silk, her eyes clouded with concern. Madam, I explained, we have discovered a violet petal and a smudged cuff. We believe the ring was removed through the secret stairway by someone who knew the cipher undetected. She gasped, My dear governess! Miss Langford, summoned again, entered trembling. She clasped her hands. I loved the ring's history. I thought to safeguard it from public display and return it to Madame privately. Her voice quavered. I feared it would be lost in the museum masses. Lady Belhaven's lip quivered. You endangered my lineage, which was entrusted to public trust. Colonel Fitzwilliam's uniform gleamed in the pale light as he exhaled sharply. Your betrayal was small, but your purpose misguided. Miss Langford sank to her knees. I am sorry. Please hear me. I retrieved the ring and intended to replace it before the exhibition. But I panicked at dawn, and I hid it in the crypt's chest beneath the Botticino panel. She led us to the secret stairway. Descending once more to the vault, she retrieved the ring from the bottom of the iron-bound chest, where she had placed it among the charters. The ring glinted like a fragment of history reborn. Watson exhaled with relief as he returned it to Lady Belhaven's gloved hand. Back in the gallery, under watchful eyes, I addressed Miss Langford. "Your devotion to heritage is admirable, but your methods have broken the trust we once placed in you. Yet mercy tempers justice. You shall remain in service under guidance, but your aspirations must walk in the light, not the shadows." Lady Belhaven brushed a tear from her cheek. "You shall teach our children the love of history, but not at the cost of betrayal." Miss Langford bowed her head in acceptance. With the ring restored and apologies accepted, we sealed the vault's secret stairway, resetting the cipher to its final form. 5 to 5 to 5, the number of the trio's triumph. Colonel Fitzwilliam mused upon the ring's provenance, its Norman crest a testament to lineage. Dr. Kessler documented its resumed custody for the museum's conservators. Watson and I observed each step, knowing the ring's presence completed the cycle we had begun with the cameo's removal and restoration. That evening, at the closing reception, Lady Belhaven stood before the throng, the ring shining upon her finger. "Tonight, we celebrate the final seal of our family's narrative," she proclaimed. "May these treasures inspire generations to come." Guests raised their glasses in homage, while Poirot and Watson lingered near the door, letting the applause wash over them like a benediction. Watson elbowed me. "Another mystery laid to rest, Poirot." I allowed a rare smile. "Yes, my friend. The greatest seals are those we do not break, and the final seal of trust, once restored, stands ever firm against the tide of deceit." As we departed beneath the moonlit portico, Lady Belhaven's figure framed in her stained-glass window, I reflected that the little grey cells had once more triumphed, not only over petty theft, but over the subtler betrayal of misplaced fidelity. And though the path of history may twist and turn, its future remains bright when illuminated by the steady torch of integrity. Chapter 12. Curtain Call and New Beginnings. The early morning sun filtered weakly through leaded windows of Belhaven, manna gilding the oak panelling with a soft golden glow. The great hall, once alive with the chatter of dignitaries and the clinking of crystal, now lay hushed and empty, save for the lingering scent of jasmine posies and polished brass. In the centre of the room stood Lady Belhaven, resplendent in a simple morning robe of dove-grey silk, staring quietly at the now empty pedestals, where, only hours before, the scarab pendant, the Botticino relief, and the Norman signet ring had each shared the stage of public admiration. At her side stood Colonel Fitzwilliam, his uniform immaculate even in repose, and Dr. John H. Watson, pen in hand and notebook tucked under his arm. Hercule Poirot, ever the precise image of dignified composure, observed each of them with a gleam of quiet satisfaction in his keen eyes. "Madam," Poirot began, bowing slightly, "the exhibition has concluded. Our treasures, once lost to darkness and deceit, have 3 times won their way back to safety. Through the little grey cells, the vigilance of friends, and the compassion of your heart." Lady Belhaven offered him a gentle smile. "Monsieur Poirot," she replied, "your wisdom and patience have restored not only objects but the very spirit of this house. I am in your debt beyond measure." Poirot's moustaches twitched in modest pride. "It has been my honour, madam." He turned to Watson. "Will you recount the final entries in our chronicle?" Watson stepped forward, clearing his throat. "In the weeks that followed the gala," he said, voice steady, "Belhaven's treasures found a permanent home in the National Collection, under a joint stewardship between the Manor Foundation and the Museum of Antiquities. Mary Briggs, despite her missteps, was retained in the household as curator of floral arrangements, her position secured by Lady Belhaven's generosity and Colonel Fitzwilliam's support. Richard Hale, having confessed and fully cooperated, was employed in the Manor's archives, where his meticulous care of documents atones for past faults. Miss Langford continued her work in cataloguing the family's charters, her loyalty renewed, and yet tempered by wisdom's lessons. Mr. Hale's duplicate key, once the instrument of betrayal, now hangs on the Manor's Trust Board wall as a reminder of vigilance's necessity." As Watson spoke, Lady Belhaven exchanged glances with Colonel Fitzwilliam. Poirot's moustaches quivered in agreement. "And the artefacts themselves?" Lady Belhaven asked softly. Watson smiled. "The scarab pendant has inspired renewed interest in ancient Egyptian studies, leading to scholarships in Belhaven's name. The Botticino relief tours the European galleries each spring, and the Norman signet ring has become a symbol of the bloodline's indomitable grace, displayed in a private case with a transparent lock that bears Lady Belhaven's own inscription. Trust betrayed is trust renewed." A hush fell as Watson concluded, and Lady Belhaven stepped forward to lift a crystal dome from a side table, unveiling the signet ring once more. "Let us seal this chapter with truth," she said, placing the ring upon the small wooden altar that had guarded it through every trial. "In honesty, we find our greatest treasure." Poirot tapped his cane upon the marble floor. 3 light taps of finality. "The little grey cells salute your courage," he declared, and Colonel Fitzwilliam offered a respectful salute in turn. Lady Belhaven turned to Poirot, voice rich with gratitude. "And now, detective, may I ask what your next case shall be?" Poirot's eyes glinted with anticipation. "Madame," he replied, "the world abounds with enigmas, lost heirlooms, whispered secrets, footprints in the dust. But tonight let us celebrate the certainty that justice, tempered by mercy, has found its home. Tomorrow, mon ami, the city's mysteries will call once again." He nodded to Watson. "Shall we, mon ami?" Watson slipped his notebook into his coat pocket and offered his arm. "After you, Poirot." The detective accepted with courteous elegance. Together they led Lady Belhaven and Colonel Fitzwilliam from the hall, passing beneath the high arch where the ancestors' portraits graced the walls. Even the stern visage of the first Sir Augustin Belhaven seemed to soften in the morning light. They paused on the terrace where the dew still clung to the rose gardens. Lady Belhaven closed her eyes, inhaling the perfume of early bloom. "I feel as though a great weight has lifted," she said thoughtfully. "Yet a new responsibility takes its place, to protect these legacies and pass them to worthy hands." Colonel Fitzwilliam squeezed her hand. "And you have promised guides, in me, in Mary, in Miss Langford, and in Dr. Kessler, a fellowship bound by integrity." Poirot stepped aside, letting the two share that quiet moment. Watson watched them, a serene smile upon his features. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the rolling hills beyond, Poirot and Watson made their way back through the gallery, now empty of guests and echoing only with the footsteps of caretakers. In each display case, the heirlooms glimmered under the pristine glass, symbols of the human heart's capacity for both error and redemption. Poirot paused before the cameo, tracing its spiraled engraving with a gloved finger. This cameo's cipher guided us not only to hidden chambers, but to hidden truths, he observed. Watson nodded. Each clue, each fingerprint, present or absent, has led us here. Poirot replaced the domino mask that had once hung beside the case, a gift from Lady Belhaven to symbolize mystery's dissolution, and stepped back. They reached the library's door, and Lady Belhaven joined them once more. "Before you depart," she said, "I have a final request, that this house remain a haven not only for relics, but for the sharing of knowledge." She extended an invitation engraved in her hand, the Belhaven Fellowship, to their guests, detailing annual lectures, scholarly residencies, and open-access archives. Poirot accepted it graciously. "Madam, your vision ensures that these treasures and the lessons they teach will endure." He bowed. "Farewell, Belhaven Manor, until our paths cross again." Watson followed, shaking hands with Lady Belhaven and offering his own pledge to document the fellowship's founding in the annals of history. Outside the servants' entrance, the morning dew had given way to sunlight warming the stone steps. A carriage waited to return Poirot and Watson to Baker Street. As they mounted, Poirot glanced back at the manor's facade, carved with centuries of legacy. "Mon ami," he said softly, "Belhaven's story concludes this chapter with honour. But the world beyond brims with untold tales. Let us be ready." Watson closed his umbrella, settling into the carriage's plush seat. "Always, Poirot." The carriage rattled away beneath the elms, and Belhaven Manor's gates swung closed behind them as the final seal was laid. In the days that followed, the fellowship flourished. Scholars from far lands studied the vault's maps. Artists drew inspiration from the cameo's spirals, and the Butler's Society praised the manor's staff for their redemptive journeys from error to trust. Children of the village toured the galleries with bright-eyed wonder, learning that history's greatest treasures are not jewels alone, but the honesty, courage, and unity that bring them to light. And at 221B Baker Street, Poirot and Watson, their coats brushed free of carriage dust, reunited with the familiar crackle of fire and the promise of new mysteries. Watson prepared his desk for a fresh narration, while Poirot polished his cane and arranged his papers. Outside the window, London's hum called to them once more, and with the final seal placed upon Belhaven's treasures, the little grey cells stood ready to unveil the next enigma.